My name is John Emerson Freeman, and John Emerson came from my Irish ancestor, John Emerson, who emigrated during the starvation in Ireland in 1847. He emigrated, and his wife was lost to ship fever, and we don't know if she was buried at sea or in a Grosse Isle cemetery. But I'll read you a letter from my brother sent to me and my sister explaining something of our Emerson heritage. John was a weaver and a farmer. They landed in Quebec and eventually moved in hazardous conditions to Waupaca, Wisconsin, when homesteading lands opened up. The family was approached by hostile natives near Madison, Wisconsin, and the only reason they were spared was because Thomas Emerson, our ancestor's daughter, Ellen Emerson, had erysipelas. Erysipelas mimicked smallpox, and the natives were afraid to come into contact with them. Rebecca said Ellen never fully recovered and was sickly all of her life, dying at age 18. Rebecca said that the family was Protestant and Orangemen. Rebecca told Mom that Robert Emerson eventually moved to Waupaca and was a shoemaker and in the Civil War. Rebecca said she hated wearing Robert's shoes as he put steel toes in them so they would last longer. Mom connected with Robert Emerson's great-granddaughter Bessie Bothwell. They exchanged stories. There was an interesting account of what happened to Isabella Emerson. Rebecca was told that Isabella Emerson contracted the fever typhus on the voyage to Canada and died on the ship and was buried at sea. But she also had a recollection later that she was buried on the island. Bessie thought it might have been Ellis Island, but we know this is not true as the Emersons landed in Grosse Isle, Quebec. This is the second letter that my sister wrote to a fellow named Doug Mackenzie, who was also involved in the Irish famine voyages. Hi Doug, I am so delighted to finally connect with you. Scott just sent me the newspaper article regarding Isabella Emerson's tragic death. I felt so sad. My great-grandmother Rebecca Emerson was the youngest daughter of Thomas Emerson. Rebecca's oldest daughter Mary had 3 children. My father was the oldest. When my mother and father started dating, my mother became very close to Rebecca Emerson after my mom's mothers died. So much so that she named my brother John Emerson Freeman, me. Rebecca Emerson moved with her parents to Little Falls, Minnesota in the early 1800s. Her father, Thomas Emerson, sold his farm in Saxville, Wisconsin. Our great-great-grandfather, John Emerson, came with the Thomas and his family. John and Thomas Emerson are buried in Oakland Cemetery in Little Falls. Rebecca was the only Emerson to come to Canada. She married a Singer sewing machine salesman who was a terrible man. Rebecca told my mom many stories about Emerson's. Rebecca as said the family came from Enniskillen. John Emerson was a farmer and a weaver. Rebecca knew the price year they came, which was 1847. She stated that John Emerson was a redhead, or ginger as they call it in Ireland. Isabella died of typhus on the voyage to Canada and was buried at sea. My mom in the 1960s communicated with Scott's great-Aunt Bessie Bothwell. From Bessie's accounts, Isabella died on a small island in Quebec. Rebecca stated that Robert Emerson was a shoemaker. We've done that one already. She said, your ancestor Edward Emerson was a farmer and also a prominent frame carpenter. Rebecca said that Edward was a heavy drinker. Rebecca said that in 1858, John acquired homesteaded land in Saxville, Wisconsin. My great-great-grandfather acquired lands there as well. In fact, the farm he sold it to in 1880 is still owned by Christensen family today. The house is still standing, probably because of Edward Emerson's skills as a carpenter. A snow apple tree that Thomas planted in 1868 is still producing apples. Do you have any photos of John or Edward Emerson? Any photos of Edward Emerson's daughter? Well, I have a few photos that I can show you. This is a picture of James Emerson. They came from Enniskillen, Ireland, and Enniskillen is famed for the production of this pottery. The white vases are produced in Enniskillen, Ireland. My great-grandfather namesake is buried in the cemetery in Little Falls, and that's his grave marker taken about 30 years ago. This is a close-up of the engraving on the marker. And this is the grand old lady. And I have to tell you a story about her. When she came to Canada, they had a terrible influenza epidemic in Manitoba, and she worked on the railroad and had them take her. She was a cook on the railroad, and she had them take her cook car into the towns, and she would cook for and serve the people food. And she never contracted any of the influenza. And that's my story about my Irish ancestors.